We have a complicated relationship. The Oxford Languages Dictionary describes knowledge as information or understanding that you gain through education or experience. Now, in my day-to-day life, there will be times where I learn about something, and instead of getting that light bulb feeling of satisfaction, I end up feeling worse. Sometimes a lot worse. As a wise person once said, knowledge is power, and regardless of the subject matter, you are ultimately better off whenever you are informed. However, when things go wrong, and then they keep going wrong, and especially when you find out that there are incredibly corrupt systems and people who are both directly and indirectly causing these things to happen, it really takes a toll on you. It really makes you realize that the world is just overrun with hatred and greed. You start to feel a lot less optimistic, a lot less hopeful, and a lot less safe. And in situations like these, I start to ask myself, did I really gain anything with that knowledge? Or did I just lose my positive perspective on the world? Let's ask him what he thinks. I've always had a very weird relationship with Zelda. I can acknowledge that these games are revolutionary and did so much service to the industry, but for one reason or another, I can rarely ever find the energy to actually complete them. Even if I do end up liking what I played, I always tend to lose interest at some point, and I can't really explain to you why or give you a reason other than this is just something that always happens. Well, maybe I shouldn't say always happens, because there have been Zelda games that I have fallen head over heels in love with. I would constantly replay them over and over again, trying to discover all the secrets and hidden unlockable weapons, and I would just get lost in them in a way that doesn't happen in any of the other games. Whenever I love a Zelda game, when everything about it finally clicks for me, it turns into a very large obsession. Again, it's a very strange relationship because either I don't play it enough or I play it way too much, and it speaks to how often this happens when I can only ever say that for 3 of the games in the series. These are games that I do plan on doing sometime in the future, but for now, I want to talk about this one. I don't want to sit here and waste your time with this segment because Ocarina of Time is the most acclaimed and awarded video game ever. Regardless on how the public sees it nowadays, it is a game that has impacted the industry ultimately for the better, and to many of you, none of that is new information. But to 12-year-old Yaj, this universal acclaim was incredibly fascinating, because it seemed like everybody was in universal agreement that this was the greatest game ever made, and they said that without really providing any kind of reason. But when going into the game for the first time, even back then, I still wanted to keep my expectations in check. I was still very new to Zelda at the time, and seeing how inexperienced I was with adventure games in general, there was always a chance that I would pick it up and put it back down within a few minutes. But as I previously alluded to earlier, that obviously didn't happen. However, it's important to remember that that was over 7 years ago, and 7 years is time. My initial playthrough of this game was on this thing, via this emulator. I was different, times were different, and ever since then, I've mainly gone back to the game via the only version that I physically own. And with being away from the game for so long, there's a very real possibility that my nostalgia for this game is going to be tainted. However, I do think that I know this game and its flaws well enough to still have a good time despite that. Plus, I've been playing Ocarina 3D fairly often as of late, so I really don't think I have that much to be worried about. But then again, there is always that slight chance. Regardless, here goes nothing. The first few minutes of this game are weird. For the most part, you are just watching a series of cutscenes that revolve around seeing the evil green man and having a fairy bump headfirst into a fence. Opening cutscenes have always been a bit of a slippery slope, especially if you can't skip them. But Ocarina is an example of how you do it right, and literally the only reason why I say that is because of how short everything is. The game just started up, and in terms of plot, the only thing that I'm interested in at this point is who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. It doesn't take that long to present these things to the player, and I'm glad that Ocarina of Time actually recognizes that. One problem though, it's not a super big problem, except yes it is. Man, I really hate to get super critical this early on, but the text speed might be the single biggest flaw that I have with this game. It is abysmally slow, and no matter how many times you tap away at that B button, it will still travel at a snail's pace. Now, for pacing purposes, I don't want to dwell on this too much right now, but especially with these opening cutscenes, while they are still relatively short, it just makes the start of a playthrough drag on longer than it realistically should. But regardless, God, I love this place. Kokiri Forest is still probably my favorite area within this entire game. It's just so green and welcoming, the music is so warm and peaceful. I've always just loved the atmosphere that this place is creating. And I also love how it's an actual place that has a name instead of just being a random part of the overworld. Now, I can sit here and gush about this place for hours, but the main function of Kokiri Forest is to introduce us to a few key characters, this giant tree thing known as the Great Deku Tree, and your primary companion for this entire game, Navi. Now, to be honest, the Great Deku Tree doesn't really do much aside from giving us this huge history lesson on Hyrule, and then dying straight after, but Navi is interesting. She is quite the divisive character for reasons that I'll get to in a second, but for gameplay purposes, Navi is responsible for a lot of things, and the most important of which being the act of Z targeting. Pressing Z will lock on his vision to any enemy, object, or person around him. And while in this state, he's able to do backflips, side hops, and the ever iconic jumping slash. And to be honest, the jumping slash is really the only one out of those three that I get any use out of. To be clear, the other two aren't completely useless. I mean, I do still use them in ways that the devs probably didn't intend, but it's mainly because the jumping slash really is that good. It does so much damage, even with the tiny little Kokiri sword, and most of the early game enemies go down in one hit when you use it. The mechanic does have some pretty serious downsides though, but for the vast majority of the runtime, the Z targeting mechanic works. And the fact of the matter is, we simply couldn't have done it without Navi. Except yes, we absolutely can. With our newfound sidekick and abilities, Link is now able to properly start this 20-hour adventure. According to the Great Deku Tree, there's this green man from the desert that wants access to the all-powerful Triforce, and in order for him to obtain it, he must first obtain 3 spiritual stones that unlock the Door of Time in the Temple of Time. So in order to stop him from doing that, you are tasked with finding and protecting those 3 spiritual stones. And in order to do that, you will have to explore the insides of a cavern, a fish, and the insides of the Great Deku Tree itself. I really don't know why we have to go inside living organisms twice, but hey, maybe it's just something you gotta do in order to save the world, damn it. These are effectively the beginner dungeons of this game, and by that metric, they do a really good job in getting the player up and running. Navigating them really isn't that hard, the puzzles are very simple, the bosses are complete pushovers, and again, none of that is bad, mind you. But a direct consequence of this is that the dungeons tend to go by incredibly fast. Like I sneezed and I was at the boss of Dodongo's Cavern. However, going through them again also made me realize just how much I actually like this game's art direction. Typically, I don't usually vibe with the darker aesthetics of most other adventure games, but there's just something about how this game utilizes it that's really appealing to me. It could just be the fact that they're using, actual colors that aren't exclusively brown and gray, but I was really liking how a lot of these rooms looked, and in general, I found that they were the things that really brought out the best of this game's atmosphere. Is exactly what I would say if you didn't exist. Alright, look, I'm just gonna come out and say it, I do not like Jabu Jabu's Belly, at all. A lot of the reasons why I dislike it, aside from the fact that you have to deal with her, is because it highlights nearly every flaw that I have with the game thus far. Anytime you have more than one target on screen, things can get really annoying really quickly, because once you take one of them down, you're left vulnerable unless you Z-target another enemy. And when there's multiple of them firing at you, dealing with them can be an overly irritating endeavor. But even if you have one target, there will be times where Link just won't lock on to the enemy. Link can be 2 feet away from an enemy, and it'll be like, huh? Oh, where? I don't see anything. Oh, what the hell? Now, I could blame the programmers for not making this mechanic more polished and snappy, but instead, I'm going to blame Navi. Not only because she's a fictional character, so I don't feel as bad, but because she commits perhaps an even more heinous crime. Navi, I love ya, but you seriously need to calm down with these frickin' hints. This is the defining reason why so many people hate her, because at the most random of times, she will just break the pace of the entire game in order to tell you something you've probably already figured out. Again, I must reiterate, this would not be that big of a deal under normal circumstances, but if I'm destroying my thumbs mashing the B button because of how slow the text speed moves, something has gone awry. Like, it's a really big problem with this game, so much so that I try to talk to as little people as possible because it's simply not worth it. All of these issues were made a lot more apparent when replaying the child portion of this game, but Jabu Jabu's Belly in particular just had all of them pile on top of each other, and it took me out of the experience in the worst way possible. Even still, for all I've ranted about it, it's still not the worst thing in the world, and like all the other child dungeons, it doesn't go on for very long. Before you know it, you'll be at the end of the dungeon and obtain the final spiritual stone. Now, all Link's gotta do is make sure that these precious stones don't fall into the wrong hands. I mean, it would be a shame if he approached the castle grounds and then all of a sudden the sky started to turn dark and Zelda was being taken away as he was being approached by this scary green man in a similar fashion to the nightmare they had during the opening cutscene of this game. That'd be a real shame. But you wanna know what would suck more? Is that after realizing that this is not a dream, as well as getting shot in the face with an energy ball, you make this face. This scene is almost verbatim what we saw a few hours ago. I mean, the only real difference is that Ganondorf gets like an additional 10 seconds of screen time, and Zelda throws something that lands in the water under the bridge. How riveting. However, when checking to see what it is that she threw, you'll find... Man, I've really gone almost 16 minutes without mentioning this thing, huh? This is the Ocarina of Time, an object that is quite literally the name of the game. However, before delving into what it does, we need to do a bit of backtracking. Way back in the early game, before we set foot into any dungeon, we met a gal by the name of Saria. When making his way out of the forest, Saria shows up at the last second and gives Link her fairy Ocarina, allowing you the glorious ability to play music for fun. This is definitely the primary function of this item, but a function that's not really as important but still pretty cool is that you can learn different songs from certain characters, and playing them allows you to do some pretty nifty stuff, like fast travel, and opening a door, and moving a block from one position to another, things that really shake up the game. Sarcasm aside, the Ocarina really is an item that makes this game more enjoyable, The ability to fast travel alone is a gigantic deal, because after learning the songs, you virtually never have to waltz around this empty plane of existence ever again. There are also songs that allow you to change the time of day, call upon your horse at any given time, move a block, open a door, you know, the classics. But honestly, perhaps my favorite thing about the Ocarina are the very songs that you're required to play, because a lot of these tunes are fantastic. Saria's Song, Song of Storms, Zelda's Lullaby, the Bolero of Fire, like all of these songs are so good, but they're also just too short. A few of these songs have gotten extended versions, but way too many of them are stuck with versions that are only 15 to 20 seconds long, which is so frustrating. It's whatever. At least on the plus side, their short length guarantees that these tunes are at the very least memorable, because they have to be. The compositions are simple enough that even if you don't really remember the inputs, you can still feel it out, for lack of a better term, just by virtue of how memorable the compositions are, which speaks to the level of genius that went into these songs. I mean, in general, Ocarina of Time has some of my favorite tracks in the franchise, at least from what I've played. It's not like I go back to it 24/7 or anything, but I've always appreciated a lot of the songs on it. I've already mentioned Kokiri Forest, but I also really love the Hyrule Field theme. Gerudo Valley is an absolute classic, and even a few of the dungeon themes I really like. I think what it does so well is that each song is very descriptive. Like, you could close your eyes, and even if you don't know where it's from, you could still very easily visualize a place that would have that song as background music. For every song on the soundtrack, even for ones that I'm not that big into, the sounds are so immersive and so vivid and fits the atmosphere so well that it's really hard for me not to appreciate them. But even with all of that being said, my favorite song in this entire game will probably always be the Serenade of Water. It is another Ocarina song, so it only lasts for a few seconds, but even as a kid, this one stood out to me in a very special way. It's very soothing and very calming, but something about it is also very delicate, like it's on the verge of collapsing. But it ends with a melody that's very optimistic and kind of motivating, ensuring that despite the pain, it must keep pushing forward until it can't push anymore. Was that not gas? In general, the Ocarina is such a crucial part of this game's legacy. It simply would not be the game it is without it. However, it's important to remember that that's only a piece of what gives this game its identity, with the other piece being this beauty. Yes, nerds and geeks, this was the Door of Time's little secret, the one, the only, Master Sword. Now, it actually works quite a bit differently from some of the other games. Instead of having a projectile-based attack when you're at full health, you'll instead gain the ability to travel through time. Link wakes up in the Chamber of Sages and meets this dude named Rauru, and he informs us that 7 years have passed. And while it's only been a grand total of 2 seconds since you obtained the Master Sword, you are now a fully grown adult man. Rauru then says that there are 5 remaining sages that are guarding 5 different temples around Hyrule. All of them are in possession of a magical medallion that is needed to defeat Ganon, who, by the way, is now roaming freely around the Sacred Realm because you took away the only thing that was keeping it secure. Frickin' oops. However, with that, Link is then sent back to the Temple of Time, and we are now finally ready to start off the adult portion of this game. From here on out, you are no longer able to use any of your toys as a child, and will instead be fighting exclusively with the Master Sword, which, on top of allowing you to travel through time, also has the incredibly innovative perk of being unable to hit anything. The Master Sword is incredibly weird in this game. It's obviously bigger, meaning that it has a much wider range, but the side effect of that is that even the most stationary of objects, Link will have an unreasonably hard time breaking. This is something that also extends to the combat, by the way, because some ground-based enemies are more difficult to hit given how much larger the Master Sword is. This could be something intentional by the devs as to make the player think about the direction in which they're attacking, but as a whole, it just makes combat with some enemies more annoying than it really should be. And half the time, I just give up on fighting them altogether. I'm also sad to say that much of the items that Link obtains from here on out are an incredibly mixed bag. The Lens of Truth and the Megaton Hammer are definitely the most functional out of the bunch, but they're also incredibly situational and are rarely ever used outside of their designated temples. Any item that requires aiming is also brung down by the fact that the aiming controls are overly sensitive. And I know this probably isn't a problem on N64, but I mean, let's be honest here, how many people actually have access to that in 2025? Really, the only one that I've ever liked using was the Mirror Shield. It's designed beautifully, I love the fact that it can reflect off light, but the one problem is that it's used in the last main temple of the game. I don't know, alright, in terms of equipment, I still think Adult Link has the child version beat, but man, these items have a lot of problems. But, as if to keep up with the trend of having high points and low points, I'm even sadder to say that the actual temples in this game are also just as all over the place in terms of quality. And look, alright, I'm getting really tired of being negative on this game, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get the worst one of the bunch out of the way first. The Forest Temple sucks. How did they think that introducing the adult dungeons with this was a good idea? It has one of the most convoluted dungeon layouts of all time. My main issue with this is that it keeps blocking off your progress at the most insulting of times. You'll find a key, progress through the dungeon like normal, only for it to be a locked door, meaning that you have to now backtrack to God knows where and find another key, backtrack all the way back and unlock that same door, only for you to find another locked door just 5 seconds later. This is the game design that I cannot stand. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I thought there was another temple that also frustrated you just as much, if not more. Well, you know what? At least the temple you're talking about is much better than the Shadow Temple. I cannot put into words how much I hate this place. Forget the fact that it's literally a straight line that has 3 or 4 branching side rooms. This dungeon was designed with the goal of pissing you off as much as humanly possible. There are mummies and redeads that Link just refuses to lock onto. There are entire rooms that only exist to waste your time, rewarding you with 5 rubies, which makes you want to slap someone. There are enemies that just love to show up in the most obnoxious of places, as well as just be weird and annoying for no reason. And my blood boils every single time I enter this specific room, because aside from the fact that it has 2 mummies, of which it rewards you with 5 rubies for defeating, by the way, it is home to the most cheapest and most unforgivable chest placement I've ever seen in any adventure game. You have to know that this thing is bombable, and use the Lens of Truth in order to see the chest that has the key that you need for progression in it. Forget Jabu Jabu's belly. These 2 are the worst dungeons in this entire game. And while I haven't beaten many Zelda games as previously mentioned, I doubt that any would have dungeons that made me this angry. But perhaps the greatest thing that enrages me about them is that those 2 temples ruin what is otherwise a set of some of the best dungeons I've ever played in a Zelda game. I could finally say that. Of the 3 remaining dungeons, I straight up can't tell you which one of them is my favorite, because in terms of design, layout, navigation, atmosphere, fun factor, like they all hit it out of the park for me. But I guess we could start off with the one that's probably going to raise the most eyebrows. Right off the bat, I must comment on the layout of this place. There's this giant pillar in the middle that has 3 branching rooms surrounding it. It also has 3 levels in which the water can rise, with there only being 3 areas where you can change it. So for the majority of the temple, you're basically looping around the 3 water levels, exploring the 4 corridors on each level. On paper, this admittedly doesn't really sound that fun, but the sole reason for why it works so well is due to how no-nonsense the progression is. Each of these corridors feature rooms that have you tackling some sort of puzzle-based challenge, and the challenges in question are all expertly thought out and manages to test you in very creative ways. However, not to take away from how well designed the water temple is, but I find that both the fire and spirit temples manage to do this even better. Both of them are almost exclusively filled with room after room, puzzle after puzzle, and challenge after challenge for the entirety of their runtimes. And to put it bluntly, I was in heaven. This is my favorite type of Zelda dungeon, ones where the progression is straightforward and simple, and are constantly throwing you into new situations in nearly every room. But helping this even further is just how distinct and unique both of them are. In the Fire Temple, your progression is mainly gated through finding and rescuing the Gorons, of which they'll grant you a key upon getting to them. It is a very, very small detail, but that detail alone makes obtaining the keys just that slight bit more satisfying. The Spirit Temple has this ingenious gimmick of being shared between both the adult and child version of Link. Child Link now has to contend with enemies and obstacles from the adult half of this game, which is such a unique twist that turns the design of the temple on its head. Honestly, this level of distinction is something that pretty much every single temple in the adult half has going for it. For as much as I loathe the Forest Temple, its only redeeming quality is the Poe hunting segment, which provides a challenge that's actually fun and adds a much needed change of pace to this hellhole. The Water Temple also has a unique gimmick. Guess what it is? In order to travel between levels, one must go to the pause menu, equip the iron boots, and then sink down to the bottom of the floor. Now, if you noticed, that only took me a grand total of 1 second to accomplish according to the stock footage that you just saw, which apparently is just enough time for everybody else to complain. Pausing and switching to the iron boots is the #1 issue that most people have with this dungeon, and I quite frankly don't know what to say to that. I would take issue with this if equipping them was some long and drawn out process, but it's not, so I don't. Personally, I think that the hover boots you get in the Shadow Temple are worse offenders, simply because aside from hovering over pits, its main thing is that it has garbage traction, slipping and sliding all over the place like it's some sort of ice level or something. How convenient! When making your way to the Shadow and Water Temples, you will naturally come across the only 2 mini-dungeons in this game. The only thing really noteworthy about them is that they house the 2 items that are required to complete the real dungeons, and that's really their only purpose. The layouts themselves are quite good though, and the bottom of the well especially is definitely a standout. Nothing screams adventure and curiosity quite like fighting a bleeding white monster and seeing actual blood splattered on the floor. These mini dungeons also have the advantage of not featuring any kind of boss whatsoever. Why is this an advantage? Well, most of them suck. I am not kidding. Phantom Ganon and Twinrova are the only good boss fights in this game. And it's not even like the fights themselves are super over the top or anything. They literally are just simple, well-designed battles that test how well you can use the main item of the dungeon. That is all they need to be. The bar is set very, very low. And somehow, every other fight in this game fails to surpass that very simple standard. If you're not two-shotting them with a single attack, you're locking on to everything but the enemy that you want to hit. If not that, then you're waiting around for the boss to show its weak point for what feels like 400 decades. If not that, then you're fighting a boss that you are unable to damage. I did not remember any of these bosses being the bane of my existence, nor do I remember each of them having their own unique problem. Thing is, I could very easily go on with this, but I really don't want to give these bosses that clearly had no thought put into them more time than they really deserve. You just have to weigh it out, put up with the jank, and after enough time, the medallion will finally be in your possession. And the sages too, I guess. So, after gathering all of the sacred stones, scratching and clawing your way through the numerous dungeons, suffering through each of the bosses, and rescuing all 6 of the sages, the moment has finally come to take the fight to Ganon himself. The final few parts of this game, like pretty much every other part, is very all over the place. We finally get to see Zelda, now as a fully grown adult woman, and she bestows upon us the light arrows, which are indeed arrows that do shoot light. This meeting is unfortunately cut short, however, because Ganon finds out that she escaped and drags her all the way back to his newly acquired castle, aka the final dungeon of the game. I think I can safely say that the inside of Ganon's castle ends off the dungeons on the best note possible. There are 6 doors that you must enter that are all themed around the dungeons that you previously completed, each of which have a handful of rooms that have you tackle a few bite-sized challenges. Making this even better is the fact that progression through the entire dungeon is non-linear. You can tackle most of these rooms in any order that you want. However, a few rooms do require the use of the golden gauntlets, which you can only get in the shadow portion. Aside from that though, I have next to nothing negative to say about this place. All of these rooms and challenges are fantastic, the atmosphere is on point for a final dungeon, the pacing and the progression is the best it has ever been. Like, this might honestly be my pick for the best dungeon in the game, because from beginning to end, I was having so much fun with it. However, the important part about this place is that it is being held up by a barrier that is powered by an energy source at the end of each door. This is where the light arrows come into play, and once you use it on all of them, the barrier will open and you can finally progress onwards. From here on out, you will be climbing multiple flights of stairs and battling some of the strongest enemies in the game. Ganon really is throwing everything he's got at you, and the way that each encounter has its own unique twist, as well as having an organ play in the background that gets louder and louder with each encounter, like, the suspense is at an all-time high, and for as simple as it is, the execution is unnervingly effective. If only I could say the same thing for the boss that follows. I was having such a good time, some of the most fun I've ever had with this game. But this Ganon fight just had to ruin it for me. And the thing that pisses me off the most about it is that this has nothing to do with the design of the boss and everything to do with this game wanting to see you suffer. The underlying premise of this fight is very simple. Ganon will shoot an energy ball at you, and you pretty much have to play a game of energy tennis until he gets hit, which is almost identical to the Phantom Ganon fight from the Forest Temple. The only difference is that you have to hit him with the light arrows when he gets stunned, which allows you to dish out proper damage. The fight itself is actually one of the more straightforward in the game, and while it's not the most difficult thing out there, you still gotta be on your toes, and I ran out of magic. I ran out of magic. Are you kidding me? Do any of the pots have any left? Bro, what? This is something that I will never understand. So, before you enter the fight, there's this room that has a bunch of pots that have extra hearts, arrows, and jars of magic. Like most items in this game, the light arrows are fueled by magic, and for some reason, they consume a lot of it. So unless you upgrade the magic meter to be even longer, you are going to run out of magic during this fight. You would think that there would be extra magic in the room below it, but for some baffling reason, once you collect magic or hearts or what have you, they will never respawn again, which essentially means that this fight is virtually impossible to win. I was in full panic mode at this point, because what the hell am I supposed to do here? I could just die and put Link out of his misery, but I had no choice but to come up with some sort of plan. And so I did. I would simply go through the fight like normal, and when Ganon got stunned, I would do the jumping slash attack due to how high its damage output is. It's not the most difficult thing in the world. It's exactly what I would say if the arrow controls were complete dog wire and the jumping slash didn't make me want to jump into the TV. Because of the fact that you have no magic refills, you have no choice but to make every arrow shot, land every jumping slash attack, and execute everything perfectly. If you miss an arrow due to the sensitive aiming, you lose. If Link doesn't connect the jumping slash, you lose. I have no shame in saying that I abuse save states like I never have before, because this is absolutely unacceptable. This fight is the biggest joke in gaming history, because there is no excuse for this. There is no reason why magic should not respawn anywhere in this game, let alone the final boss. And if you need an external upgrade in order to make the endgame boss winnable, something has gone cataclysmically wrong. But after 15 tedious minutes of saving and missing shots and crying, Ganondorf finally went down. Kill me. Afterwards, he then does a thing that causes the room to disintegrate. Zelda then shows up, freeing herself from the gemstone, and the tower all of a sudden starts to collapse. Not wasting any time, the two make their way out of the castle in a sequence that is so refreshing after what I just went through. It is definitely more spectacle over substance, but for what it's worth, it's a very memorable set piece that even has a few encounters. With Stalfos. Again. Great. They both manage to escape the fortress in time and watch as the entire castle crumbles to the ground. Does this mean that Ganon is finally dead? I wish. Ganondorf rises from the debris, does a thing with his hand, and transforms into the actual final boss of this game, Demon King Ganon. And just like with the dungeons, this fight ends off the entire game on the most cinematic note possible. And I am so happy to say that. Right off the bat, I just want to say how much I've always loved the atmosphere of this fight. Darkness surrounds the entire arena, with the only thing illuminating it being the occasional lightning strike. The music is full of sorrow and pain, and Ganon just towers over you with a design that is as raw as it is absolutely terrifying. Obviously, none of this would really mean much if the boss was anything like the one before, but thankfully, the fight itself is one of the best in the entire game. You don't have the Master Sword for the first half, meaning that you'll have to use the next best thing in order to hit Ganon's weak point. My main method is to just roll between his legs, pause, and hit his tail that way. Eventually, his barrier goes down and you're able to claim back your precious sword. Doesn't really change much about the dynamic, but after a few more slashes, Ganon successfully becomes incapacitated. Zelda then uses her magic to keep him down, Link's sword reaches full power, and with one more jumping slash, Ganon's life is put to a satisfying end. Zelda then calls upon the sages, and the 6 of them then seal Ganon away in the evil realm, which is a place that exists apparently. As for Zelda and Link, they're both floating in the sky, and feeling bad for tarnishing Link's childhood, Zelda uses the Ocarina to send Link back to his original time. Link then puts the Master Sword back in its pedestal, says goodbye to the only person who's been with him his entire adventure, and walks away from the pedestal, ending off Ocarina of Time. Yeah, so I'm just gonna come out and say it. I had no idea this video was going to turn out like this. Even as a kid, I always knew that there were things about this game that weren't really the best, but man, this playthrough was a direct slap in the face with just how many legitimate problems this game has, many of which are problems that I simply never faced before. I do think that my familiarity with the vastly superior 3DS version definitely played a part in that, but honestly, I think an even bigger reason might just be the one thing that I was hoping didn't happen. My memories got tainted. I went into this project feeling fairly confident that my nostalgia with this game would be validated, that the positive memories of playing this game over the summer would come back to me. But like I said, I was instead greeted with a slap in the face. 7 years is time. Like I said before, I went from being young Link to adult Link in that time. And with time comes a lot of things. And not all of those things are negative, mind you. But the one thing that is almost always guaranteed is knowledge. The more you grow, the more you'll naturally learn. And the more you learn, the more your view of the world will open up. And that's the aspect of knowledge that people rightfully praise and commend. It's never a bad thing to have a more open view of the people and things around you, especially in a world that's so ever-changing. But what I really wanted to showcase is that there is a dark side to it too. My recent experience with this game and all the frustration that I endured is only one example of this. But the power that knowledge has can also make it so much harder to feel any kind of excitement for things that used to bring you joy. Whether that's knowledge of a superior version of a video game, knowledge of the people or circumstances behind a piece of art, or even knowledge about what's most likely going to happen in the future. And to that last point, the ending of this game does subtly explore that possibility. Sure, Link may have put the sword back in its pedestal and saved the world, but really, at what cost? Remember, that is still a kid in that adult body, and throughout the course of his adventure, he has witnessed some horrible and downright disturbing things that no child should ever see. He will forever have the knowledge of all the horrible things that went down in this land. And with this newer, more darker perspective on life, how does anyone, let alone a child, manage to go about the rest of their days knowing just how scary and dangerous the world truly is? Well, the answer to that question lies within one of this game's many characters. A character that I've gone the entire video without mentioning until now. Sheik. Of all the characters in this game, Sheik is the most important for a couple of key reasons. He's the one that tells you where all 5 of the dungeons are, and you'll often run into him on your way to said dungeon. He's also the one who teaches you a majority of the Ocarina songs, and perhaps the most important, he is revealed to be the 7th sage of the Sacred Realm, i.e. Princess Zelda. Throughout your entire journey, Sheik is a consistent symbol of knowledge. However, I can very easily imagine that the path to getting that knowledge was also a very disturbing and traumatizing process. But despite it all, he knows what's ultimately at stake. He knows that it's simply not possible to help the hero of time save the world without getting the knowledge and going through those experiences in order to get it. But even still, regardless of how disturbing the information got, the knowledge that Sheik has gained will forever be valuable. And I don't just mean that on a factual level, but I also mean it on a more transcendent one. I mentioned earlier that he's the one who teaches Link most of the Ocarina songs, but before he does that, he gives Link some words of wisdom, so to speak. He primarily talks about the theme of growing up, and each of the songs that he plays is meant to represent a certain aspect of aging. So not only do each of these songs have their own meaning, but there's something that Link is able to take with him beyond this adventure, because again, that is still just a kid in there. To me, that is the thing about knowledge that I find so valuable, and what makes all the negative things that come with it worth it. Moving forward is the ultimate end goal of knowledge. How one chooses to live the rest of their life with the information that they gain is ultimately the thing that gives knowledge its power. And whether or not your perception of the world changes, it will never be as important as what you end up doing with it. And the fact is, we'll never know what Link is going to do with the knowledge that Sheik gave him. Hell, with the knowledge that I've gained in the last year, even I don't know how I'm going to fully apply it. But I guess to relate that back to the message that this game is spreading, it's important to just let time do its job. Time and age and experience will help you in this process. It will naturally grant you the ability to take the knowledge that you gain with you in a meaningful and impactful way, regardless of how depressing it may be. It's because of that reason why I've become even more thankful for the knowledge that I've gained, because even if the truth seems very upsetting and disheartening, I'll always know that one day it'll all make sense.